Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the TNRD regular board meeting for Thursday, October 17th, 2024. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities across our vast regional district, and today we are located on the Tk'emlúps-te-Secwépemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwépemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tk'emlúps-te-Secwépemc and respects the territory and land on which we gather today. Directors attending via Zoom. I see Director O'Toole is on Zoom. I understand Director Blackwell was supposed to be on Zoom, so I don't know what happened. Maybe his evil twin is here today.
It's Dark Merlin.
It's Dark Merlin here today with us. So Director Thorpe, you might want to just beware or keep an eye on him for us, whichever. Maybe you should be worried. So in your blue folder, you will have seen something about the Thompson-Nicola Regional Library's 50th anniversary, and it is also National Libraries Month. We have special events continuing through to the end of October in Kamloops, Merritt, Cache Creek, Ashcroft, Blue River, and Clinton. Thus far, these events across the TNRD have attracted hundreds of library patrons, so don't miss out on the fun. Help spread the word about the celebrations. And please see the TNRL insert in your folder for event details of what is coming up in your community. The TNRD recently recognized 3 of its firefighters with exemplary service medals, and all of these members happen to be fire chiefs of their respective departments. So congratulations to South Green Lake Fire Chief Roger Graham, who has served for 21 years. Vavenby Fire Chief Philip Weber, who has served for 23 years. And McClure Fire Chief Noel Johnson, who has served for 28 years. This medal is awarded on behalf of the Governor General of Canada to firefighters who have shown exemplary service through good conduct, industry, and efficiency, and have completed at least 20 years of service, 10 of which have been served in the performance of duties involving potential risks. At the last meeting, we mentioned how the TNRD had surpassed more than 200 firefighters across its 9 departments, and we are happy to share more of this good news today. So thank you to Chief Graham of South Green Lake, Chief Weber of Vavenby, and Chief Johnson of McClure for your outstanding contributions to fire safety and helping make your local fire departments as great as they are. Just a quick reminder, in case anyone was not aware, there is a provincial election going on, and general voting day is Saturday, October the 19th. All polling stations are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and are wheelchair accessible. If you go on to Elections BC website, you will get a map showing the location of all the general voting day polling stations in your area. A reminder that on Wednesday, November 6th, we have Budget Workshop Day 1. On Thursday, November 7th, we have Budget Workshop Day 2, followed later that day by the inaugural board meeting. Today in your blue folders, you will find your regular mail and your TNRL insert. In the event of an emergency, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave by the safest exit doors, either at the rear of the room to the left or the main entrance on my left. Go down the staircase, exit the building, and assemble in the staff car parking lot of the rear of the Paramount Theater. Please do not run, do not use the elevators. If you have mobility problems and think you will need assistance in the event of an emergency evacuation, please speak with the General Manager of Legislative and Corporate Services before the meeting, and they will assist you. All right, are there any additions to deletions from the agenda? Seeing none, we have the minutes of the October 3rd, 2024 meeting to consider. Director Ranta, seconded by Director Grenier. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Is anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Director O'Toole. All right, we have delegations and invited presentations. And first up, we have Intellectual Freedom for National Libraries Month, presentation from Dr. James Turk, Director of the Center for Free Expression at Toronto Metropolitan University. And I'm going to hand over to Chief Librarian Judy Moore to do the introduction honors.
Well, good afternoon, TNRD board. I am delighted to introduce to you Dr. James Turk for this afternoon's very brief presentation. It follows a very successful keynote and event that was held yesterday at the Paramount Theatre in celebration of the library's 50th anniversary and its celebrations. So Dr. Turk is a leading scholar in intellectual freedom and freedom of expression in Canada, both cornerstones of public libraries. As the director of the Centre for Free Expression at Toronto Metropolitan University, Jim's work centers on ensuring that public discourse remains informed and open, essential pillars of democracy. The center's work spans public education, advocacy, legal reform, and advisory services. In recognition of Jim's significant contributions to intellectual freedom in Canada, he was recently awarded the inaugural Canadian Federation of Library Associations Intellectual Freedom Award. Please extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Jim Turk.
Welcome, board members. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today about intellectual freedom. I'm using a PowerPoint, so Justin will get that on the screen so you can see it. Whoops. I want to go back. Okay. We're in an unusual time in Canada, as you know. The election is coming up. I live in Ontario. There's a lot of talk about the polarization that's occurring in British Columbia. We have the same kind of divisions in Ontario and I think in most of the provinces. And it's raising serious challenges for libraries. And I want to talk to you about libraries are a space that makes it possible for people to learn, to socialize, to escape, to connect in ways that no other place in our society, whether it be private or governmental or commercial, does. It's you're responsible ultimately for a unique resource in all of your communities across the region. The Librarian of Congress, which is the largest library in the world, describes libraries as the great equalizer that provide resources to everyone in the community so that they can make up their own minds about issues, so they have a diversity of resources and can better participate in their families and their communities and in the public discourse that's the basis of and the heart of democracy. So you're clear what I'm talking about when I'm talking about intellectual freedom. I'm talking about the right to express your views as well as the right to hear others' views. In other words, intellectual freedom and freedom of expression is about two things. It's the right to hear and the right to speak. It's also, in the United States, they frequently talk about freedom of speech. In Canada, we talk more about freedom of expression. And that's important. That's an important difference because expression can be oral, but it can also be in writing and dance and art and theater and a variety of modalities. And finally, expression includes not only the content of what you say, but the manner in with which you convey it. If you're really upset about something going on in the community or in society, it's not appropriate to say, well, Jim, you can say what you want to say, but you can't be angry about it. You can't be emotional because that emotion is part of how we convey what our message is. So that's what's protected. But all of that is under attack. I'm just showing you some headlines over the last year from across North America about the number of attempts to censor what's in libraries, to stop children having access to books or adults having access to books or programs being offered. I could show you many more, but it's a huge issue across North America, and I'm sure you've read about it and know about it. Now, your own library and the policy that you've approved is really quite clear about the centrality of intellectual freedom. It talks about how you support the British Columbia Library Association's statement on intellectual freedom and goes on to talk about how the library acquires a wide range of materials representing various points of view, including materials that may be considered controversial or offensive to some individuals. nationally, the Canadian Federation of Library Associations has an equally strong statement on intellectual freedom, as you can see on the screen, and how it includes having in the collection material that individuals or groups consider to be unconventional, unpopular, or unacceptable, and that all persons in Canada have a right, subject only to the Constitution and to the law, to have access to the full range of knowledge, imagination, ideas, and opinions, and to express their thoughts publicly, and that only the courts can abridge free expression rights in Canada. Now, a lot of people say, well, yes, that's true of North America, that may be European, but that's pretty much a Western notion. But in fact, the strongest statement on intellectual freedom is from the International Federation of Library Associations, which is made up of the national library associations from more than 100 countries around the world. And it's very clear in its strong statement that libraries shall ensure that the selection and availability of materials and services governed by professional considerations and not by political, moral, and religious views. And the library shall inquire, organize, and disseminate information freely and oppose any form of censorship. That libraries shall make materials, facilities, and services equally available and accessible to all users, and there shall be no discrimination by race, creed, gender, age, or for any other reason. And then finally, an obligation on library employees, and that is they have a duty to uphold these principles. So that right in intellectual freedom is also located in international law. The most important international legal document is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted by the United Nations in 1948, 3 years after it was founded. And it's sort of the foundational statement of what are the rights that every person has by virtue of being human. And there were 30 of them identified, and one is the right to freedom of opinion and expression, including the right to hold opinions without interference. And this is where libraries come in to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. This right is also recognized in Canadian law. Our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, brought in 1982, long after libraries had developed their own policies, but affirming them, identifies only 4 fundamental freedoms. And they're in Section 2 of the Charter, and Section 2B is the freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. Now, the reason this is important has probably been described best by then Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin. This was in a case that the Supreme Court heard in 2001. And she really laid out why this is important and what standards our law and our courts hold for the right to have free expression and intellectual freedom. She wrote that amongst the most fundamental rights possessed by Canadians is freedom of expression. It makes possible our liberty, our creativity, and our democracy. It does this by protecting not only good and popular expression, but also unpopular or even offensive expression. The right to freedom of expression, she wrote, rests in the conviction that the best route to truth, individual flourishing, and peaceful coexistence in a heterogeneous society in which people hold divergent and conflicting beliefs lies in the free flow of ideas and images. If we do not like an idea or an image, we are free to argue against it or to simply turn away. But absent some constitutionally adequate justification, we cannot forbid a person from expressing it. Because of the importance of the guarantee of free expression, any attempt to restrict the right must be subjected to the most careful scrutiny. And when the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court talks about the most careful scrutiny, what she's saying is the court applies a very high bar before expression can be shut down or denied. Now, what's happening now, we're seeing in libraries and elsewhere in our society, is challenges, demands for censorship coming from every possible direction. I'm just going to show you a few. This is an image of a drag storytime event, which is the most challenged thing that's happened in libraries in Canada in the last 2 years. There have been more challenges to drag story times than anything else. But there's also been challenges to LGBTQ positive books. Genderqueer is the most challenged book in North America. Or to a lot of books on sex education for kids. This is by a Canadian author, Corey Silverberg. who said he got in a disagreement with his publisher. His publisher said, one of the ways we make sure that there are fewer objections to sex education, good sex education books for kids and young adults, is we don't put the word sex in the title. He insisted the word sex be in the title, and now it's also one of the most challenged books in North America. But people who are challenging these books are not challenging another set, which are challenged by other people. This is a book called Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier. It's called The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. Or this guy, who you may recognize, Jordan Peterson, is subjected to demands that his events be canceled, his books not be read. Or a lot of classic children's books, which are wonderful children's books, but have images that we wouldn't use today. There's demands that they be challenged. And this comes from a different set of people. So we're getting challenges from every sort of direction. And what it reflects in the Toronto Public Library is having a 2-year campaign on intellectual freedom. And this is one of their posters, which I love. I'm all for free speech, but. And in fact, almost everybody in our society is in favor of free speech until they come across expression that they don't like or think is harmful or disagrees with their views. And well, I'm for free expression, but just not that. The library shouldn't have that, or that shouldn't be allowed to be heard in our program. What we're also seeing is a change in the format. When people objected to things in libraries, they typically would come into the library, say, I took out this book for my kid. I found it really wrong, age appropriate, whatever, inappropriate. And the librarian would have them fill out a request for reconsideration form. And the library would review its policy to see if the book was consistent with it. And if it wasn't, it would remove it. And if it was, it would say, I'm sorry, we're keeping it. But now we're seeing far different and more aggressive ways of challenging. These are all images of protests outside of public libraries in Canada. One of those is one of yours, that occurred in the last year, where not filling out a little form, but coming outside in numbers to say, you got to get rid of this book, or you got to get rid of this program. We're also seeing the use of petitions. This is a petition from the Winnipeg Public Library where they're trying to get rid of books, and they're getting thousands of people to sign the petition. Sometimes it goes even further. Drag storytime events in Coquitlam and Calgary, people actually charged into the room where the drag storytime was going on and started yelling homophobic epithets at the performers, at the parents, and at the kids. And the police had to be called and the people arrested. So we're seeing a whole new approach to challenges. And in a regional library, not unlike yours in southern Manitoba, a group called the Concerned Citizens Canada came to the library and said, we want to get these sex education books out. Now, all these are award-winning books, highly respected. They wanted them out of the library, and the library reviewed them and said, I'm sorry, they meet our criteria. They're well-respected ways of educating young people about sex. And so they then started meeting with the municipal councils of each of the 6 communities that make up the South Central Regional library system, demanding that they defund their public libraries. And the worrisome thing I have to share with you is 2 of them are actually considering doing that right now. So much of this is coming from organized groups. These are some of the major groups in the United States, the strongest of which is the one in your upper left-hand corner, the Moms for Liberty, which receive millions and millions of dollars from foundations and others to push this agenda. But these are the organizations that exist in Canada. We have quite a number of them that are leading these campaigns to have things removed. The strongest of which is Action for Canada, which started in southern BC as an anti-masking, anti-vaxxer group, and now has moved on to dealing with a variety of other things including purging our libraries, both school libraries and public libraries, of books that they find offensive. Now, I want to end with 2 things. One is talking about the problems of censorship and also talking about what boards can do. One of the problems with censorship is that the demands for censorship is a sign of weakness. It's really a confession by those demanding it that they cannot coexist with divergent ideas. These demands result from a fear of freedom of expression and public discourse. And yet that's the foundation of our democracy, to be able to have those. A second problem is that censorship rejects the understanding that in a democracy, we solve problems by public discourse, often through very difficult discussions. Sure, I don't know if your family's like mine. I have some difficult discussions with my brothers or my kids who have different views, but it's how we collectively work those things out. And they're often difficult, but they can't be avoided. The author Salman Rushdie, I think, put it well when he said, a mature society understands that the heart of democracy is argument. The third problem I want to talk about with censorship is not a theoretical one, but a practical one. Censorship doesn't work. It's often, in fact, counterproductive. And I just want to give you 6 or 7 ways in which that is. One, it can't capture what it's trying to prevent. It's always too broad or too narrow. I'll illustrate that with thoughts of this guy. That's Henry Louis Gates Jr., who's one of the leading Black intellectuals in the United States, head of the African American Studies Center at Harvard, and wrote about this 30 years ago and continues talking about it. And he gives an example of what he's talking about by saying that one day after class, he's in the middle of Harvard Yard, which is the centerpiece of the Harvard campus, with his students, all Black students from a seminar. And some guy comes by saying, "You effing N-word, whatever shouldn't be at Harvard, get the F out of here," and stalks off. And, this is hard to hear. The next day he's with his same group of students when one of their white friends, one of their good buddies, comes up and puts his arm around his Black buddy, and said, "I just want to say I'm so happy to see all of you at Harvard. Harvard is such a much better place because we have affirmative action procedures that allow people like you to be here." Now, what Gates points out is the second thing is actually more hurtful in a lot of ways, right? And he talks about, if you really want to penalize, if you want to deal with racism by getting rid of racist speech, outlawing it, making it illegal, it makes no sense to single out gutter epithets like the N-word and so forth, which are more likely to stigmatize the speaker than the intended victim. The real power is commanded by racism is likely to vary inversely with the vulgarity with which it's expressed. In other words, yes, you can rule out saying the N-word and a few things like that, but the thousands of ways in which you can express racist views, you can't possibly start making those illegal without just shutting down discourse in a society. I can be racist just by walking through the halls of my university and saying hi to every white colleague and ignoring or turning away from every Black colleague. I mean, there's just innumerable ways. A second problem with censorship is it doesn't get rid of the bad ideas or the people holding those bad ideas. It just drives them underground. And oftentimes when they're underground, they become more virulent and reappear in yet new ways. It also draws more attention to the people or ideas of concern. A publisher will tell you one of the best things that could happen when they have a new book coming out, especially by a well-known author, is for people to start demanding that it be banned, because then people buy it because they're interested. What the heck's this about, right? So it has the opposite effect. It also often causes free speech martyrs in the public mind. My example number one is this guy, Jordan Peterson. The headline of the newspaper story tells the point. He's done very well as a result of people trying to censor him. There was a study done of his GoFundMe account. He was a full professor, very well-paid full professor. He's made so much money from his other activities, he's been able to give up that job. But he also had an equivalent of a GoFundMe account initially. And every time he had an event canceled, he brought in the following 7 days between $25,000 and $50,000 US because of people feeling concerned. So those who thought they were doing something good by trying to get him canceled actually helped him a good deal. Also, censorship denies us the right to see and consider ideas that we may disagree with. If I don't like certain kinds of books, or I don't like certain ideas, but if I don't read them, I don't get sharp about how to counter them. You can't oppose something if you don't know what it's about. I don't know if you watched the debate between the vice presidential candidates in the United States, but when I was listening to Ezra Klein's podcast, it's a New York Times podcast, they were doing an analysis of how Waltz and Vance did, and they said, in pure debating skill, Vance was sharper than Waltz. And Klein was noting, Waltz was chosen partly because he was such a good debater, but the Democratic approach, the party approach at that stage had kept him out of difficult situations, whereas Vance was going on various liberal programs and debating, and you get sharper when you do that. And that Waltz had actually gotten less able as a debater because he hadn't had the opportunity to confront different views. And that's what happens generally to us. So if you're concerned about a particular issue and you find somebody's views offensive, but then you're told you're not allowed to read them, how do you counter them? Sixthly, censorship raises the most obvious question. Who should have the authority to decide what everyone else can see and hear? Because I find a book in the library offensive. Do I have a right to say none of you can go to the library and read it because it can't be there? We can't operate that way in a democratic society. We have courts and we have laws based on which things can be excluded, but it can't be just because somebody in the community is troubled by it. Or to put it differently, I don't know, Judy, how many books do you have in your collection across the region, roughly? Putting you on the spot here. 800,000. Now, if every one of those was removed because somebody in one of your communities found that book offensive, I suspect you wouldn't have many books left in the library, given the diversity of your community. And what I like, you may hate. And if we could get rid of things just because one or another person found it offensive, we wouldn't have much of a collection left. And then finally, censorship gives a false idea that we're actually achieving something. If you're concerned about racism, as I am, I wish we could get rid of it just by getting rid of racist speech. But we can't. It diverts us from dealing with the real solutions, because if we're concerned with racism, whether it be anti-Indigenous racism or anti-Black racism or any other form of racism, we have to deal with really fundamental problems like underlying economic, social, and cultural inequality, our flawed criminal justice system. And these are big issues to deal with that don't go away just because people feel they can't say racist things. In other words, we have to grapple with this situation seriously, and censorship gives a false image that you're doing something useful when you're actually doing something not useful for that issue and harmful for basic democracy. And I just would conclude by this section by saying, if we reject censorship as a bad way to deal with things, that doesn't mean we don't have to still deal with the issues. We just have to deal with them in other ways. And then finally, what boards can do. Now, you're the equivalent of library boards elsewhere in the sense that you approve the policies for the regional library. It's a different structure in regional libraries in British Columbia, but ultimately the responsibility that you have, I think there are several things that I'd recommend in closing. One is that you build, as we're trying to do now, a shared understanding of what intellectual freedom means. So and its importance to a public library. So when there are some of these challenges that we're seeing and the library gets into a difficult situation, you have an understanding of it and the importance of why libraries take such a strong position in defending intellectual freedom. And secondly, ultimately, you approve the library's policies. It's important to ensure that the library has comprehensive and unambiguous policies related to intellectual freedom, which are related to many different policies. There are policies on what's in the collection, the programs, what policies govern programs that your library puts on. If they make space available, what are the policies that guide that? Policies on displays, on internet use, on patron code of conduct. You want to, as the oversight body, want to make sure your library has good policies on all those things. It's also important that you support your CEO, because when these challenges come in, often the CEO is put in or the chief librarian is put in a really difficult position. And it's vital that the board and the CEO support her decisions, and to be clear about the respective roles of the board and the chief librarian. As the BC Library Trustees Association puts it, the board governs and the library director manages. The board delegates the operational day-to-day authority to the library director. The last two things are, it's important that you be proud champions of your library. Your regional library is a model, I think, across Canada for the way it fulfills its role and its responsibilities to the community. And you have a diverse and growing community. It's quite diverse of I was talking to somebody and it was at Blue River yesterday, and those issues are there, are rather different than in Kamloops or in Merritt or wherever. But that diversity and the library is working, I think, really well to try to meet all those needs. And it's important when people ask you about it to help share with the public about the role the library plays. And in that sense, to be an ambassador. The public needs to understand about the importance of intellectual freedom. And sometimes if in your conversations, given all the roles you play, issues of library come up, it's not occasion to talk about some of the issues I'm sharing with you. So, whoops, sorry, I pressed the wrong button here. I'm not managing this well. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. If there are any questions you have, that's my email address. I'd be happy to answer any of them. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. We have the email address up there for anyone who has any questions. Does anyone have any quick questions or comments right now? Well, we have Dr. Turk at the podium as he returns.
And I'm grateful to see there's a question, because when you give a talk on intellectual freedom and nobody asks a question, it's worrisome. And hard questions are particularly appreciated.
Director O'Reilly and Director Hall.
Thank you. Fascinating presentation. I feel like I could spend hours just picking your brain. But you were here talking today specifically about libraries and the things that we're dealing with as a board. But there are other institutions or levels of government that are making big changes that we're sort of having to deal with when we look at universities that are censoring or are not allowing people to come talk at universities just down the highway from us, or federal government bills that are coming in place. And we're sort of collateral damage a little bit. Like it's almost like trust is being destroyed at a certain level, and then all of a sudden, well, it's the libraries, they are a problem as well. So how do we navigate the things around us that we can't control, but by default, we are directly connected to them?
Well, I think you can speak out about those if as is happening in some universities. My former job was the executive director of the Canadian Association of University Teachers. So I've had to deal with these issues a lot. And you find in universities, as you do elsewhere, this notion that I'm all for free speech, but, right? And so it comes from the left, it comes from the right, it comes from a variety of sources, and we have to speak out against it whenever it occurs. We do have limits on intellectual freedom and freedom of expression in this country. I can't punch one of you in the face and say, well, I'm just expressing my disdain for your viewpoint. You can't threaten violence. You can't you engage in hate speech. You can't defame people. So there are a variety of limits that our society puts on it. But when people want to extend it beyond those limits, that's when I think you have to speak out, whether it be at a university or a library or wherever else. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Director Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to take in the presentation yesterday, and I got a shout out to Judy and her team for putting together a fantastic program that was well attended, as well as Dr. Turk doing a presentation. We had Leslie Martin there talking about literacy. And I just thought it was fantastic to have that here within our community, because it is so important to see the libraries and communities like ours have the potential to grow. But I do have a question. And you talk about change within the library systems, okay? And I'm wondering if we are going to see the advent of change with artificial intelligence and how it's going to impact libraries in the positive way in the near future, whether that be from user service, whether it be from data collection, library, potential smart libraries, perhaps even. I'm just interested to hear a comment on that.
I always have difficulty knowing what to do when people ask me questions about artificial intelligence, something I spend a lot of time thinking about, and we have a number of public panels and events at our center about it. The short answer is we just don't know. We don't know where that's going. I don't know how much experience any of you have had with artificial intelligence. I told a story yesterday. I mean, calling it intelligence is a misnomer. It's not intelligent at all. What it is, it's been fed billions of bits of data and knows what kinds of words follow other kinds of words in context and creates answers. But you can see some of its limitations currently. The anecdote I told yesterday, I was with a colleague of mine who's one of Canada's leading Shakespearean scholars. And so I called up ChatGPT on my computer and I said, please give me an assessment of Professor Sale's article on Coriolanus, one of Shakespeare's plays. And I got this 3-page document that sounded great and analyzed her viewpoint. And I showed it to her. She said, this is all BS. So I thought, well, let me test it. So I put in a question. Please give me your analysis of Professor James Turk's article on Coriolanus. I'd only seen Coriolanus once. I've never written about it. I'm not Shakespearean scholar. And I got the thing with a detailed assessment of my views on Coriolanus. So, I mean, it's designed to provide answers to whatever questions, even if it doesn't have the answers, and it's politely referred to as hallucinations. So it has uses. My son works for Bell Canada. They have their own version of it that can produce various kinds of documents and legal things and other that can be useful. But what its use in a library or more generally in society is still at this point reasonably unclear. So I can't really answer your question. It might lead to certain kinds of documents that Judy needs written being able to be produced. But in terms of a broader impact, I'm not sure. And then there's some interesting copyright questions. Almost everything fed into these artificial intelligence systems is material that's copyrighted in the library. And if you wanted to reproduce it, you'd have to pay, but they've agglomerated all of it. So there's some interesting cases going forward in the US about copyright infringement, and where that's going to lead, I don't know. So I can't really answer your question. It's a long-winded way of saying that.
Thank you very much for a very thought-provoking and interesting discussion. And thank you for coming. And thank you to Chief Librarian Moore for arranging yesterday's session. I understand her to have said there were 200 people there at one point at the Paramount Theatre hearing about books and libraries, which I think is an awesome thing. All right, we move on to Yellowhead Community Services. We have a presentation from Chairperson Jack Keogh and Director Leslie Grew regarding the regionalization of the rural transit systems. So over to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing us to make this presentation. Before we begin, is there a possibility I could get some water? I suspect I'm going to be a little bit long-winded and may need a sip of water at some point. I'll also maybe begin by introducing myself. My name is Jack Keogh. I'm the chairperson of Yellowhead Community Services Society. Leslie Grew is a director of Yellowhead Community Services and formerly the CAO of District of Clearwater, and I'm formerly the Chief Executive Officer of Yellowhead Community Services. I look around the table and I see a lot of familiar faces, people I've worked with, people that have been colleagues of mine in the past. I even have a neighbor here. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I was also going to start by saying I think you know, who have worked with me in the past know that I'm fairly forthcoming. And my interest is the betterment of communities, not so much our agency, and I can maybe characterize that in some more detail. So let me begin by saying, just talking a little bit about the role of our society. So it's we provide services in rural communities all throughout the region covered by the TNRD, with the exception of Lillooet, which is in a different regional district. But we have services in Clearwater and Barrier. We service Blue River, Vavenby. We have offices in Ashcroft. We have a childcare. We have services in Lillooet and Merritt, and as well Cache Creek. So we're present in many of the communities that the TNRD is also present in. I want to deal with a bit of the elephant in the room to demonstrate that this is not a self-serving exercise. We are the operator of these two systems, both in the Clearwater North Thompson system and in the Ashcroft, Cache Creek, Clinton, Lillooet system, the health connections. just to put it in perspective, the funding from BC Transit to our agency is up to roughly $225,000. That represents 3.2% of our annual operating budget. If we lose that, we are not in trouble. We are okay. So, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to cite to you within the purposes of our Constitution. And that is that, and it's the purpose number 2, we provide and operate public transportation, services for seniors, disadvantaged and impoverished individuals, and the local public residing in rural communities in the central interior of BC. So that's our mandate. That's what we do. And as I said earlier, we run a wide range of services, including counseling, daycares, early childhood development, services to seniors, services to persons with disabilities. And so we're part of the fabric of the community. Before I get into some of the more details, as I was crafting this in my notes this morning, I was reminded of Mark Twain, a quote where he said that I wanted to apologize for the lengthy letter that I wrote. I didn't have the time to write a short one. And I feel like that a little bit here before this presentation, as Mayor Roden would attest to at the Ashcroft meeting the other night. So let me talk a little bit about the history of both the Clearwater and the Ashcroft systems. So in 1997, the Clearwater system came into existence. Clearwater, Barrier, Sun Peaks. Clearwater and Barrier were not incorporated at the time. That system came in because a number of people in Clearwater wanted to see a public transportation system. They lobbied the then director, Director Schaefer at the time, to conduct a feasibility study or to support the development of a system. Her response to us was, demonstrate the community support and I'll have a referendum. We organized a meeting. We brought 300 people out to the Clearwater Senior Secondary School. Overwhelming, in fact, I could say unanimous support for the system. From there, it went to a referendum and it was passed by 95%, something like that, which is, as you all know, from referendums and alternative processes, that's not all that common. So the community was behind it. Over the years, because again, there was no local government, our contract was with the TNRD, but we were pretty much left to our own to sort of figure out how the system would best meet riders and the needs of the community. And we were fairly creative and innovative, and we certainly did the best we could for the resources that we had. With the incorporation of both Clearwater and Barrier, we then, in particular with Clearwater, who now held the contract, we were able to communicate more directly with our, local government partners, and to also to look at ways in which we may want to improve the system. The Ashcroft system was a little bit different. We were actually approached by BC Transit to take over that system. It had been failing. It had been losing money. And I hope it's not uncommon, but I hope it's not unfair to cite that because of the poor quality of the service, one of the local governments pulled out of the system. We took it over and we immediately brought about many changes to, one, satisfy the economic concerns, the actual maintenance and running of the system, and improved ridership. So we brought in an 800 number so that people could phone for free to book rides. We, believe it or not, we got cell phones for the riders because there were no cell phones for the riders, and it was a safety consideration. Here's another one. We actually turned the collection of the fares over to the village of Ashcroft, which had not happened. Those fares were used for maintenance costs, and they should have been turned over. We introduced the special trip process, which is intended to help seniors, help other community groups sort of move around and navigate in groups to various special events, and it was very successful. The hopes was that we could also sort of try to not so much expand the service, but since the buses were already in the region, of looking to other possible users. I see former Director Rice behind me. He at one point stepped up and made some financial contributions into the system so that the bus could stop in Spence's Bridge. Similarly, we met with the councils of Cache Creek Council, so the council on a couple of occasions. We explained the changes and we hopeful that they would come back into the system, which they eventually did do. So we've done a lot of work, frankly, between ourselves and our local government partners. And in any of the things I've just talked about, there was no input from BC Transit, frankly, or no suggestions, no recommendations. We simply did this based on our knowledge of the system, our knowledge of the areas, the knowledge of our riders, and we improved the services. I wanted to talk next a little bit about the process that we are currently going through. And believe me when I say this, what I've been through a considerable number of reorganizations, centralizations, regionalization processes with all levels of government, senior government, federal and provincial. And I'll begin by saying those words are euphemism for extracting services and jobs out of rural communities. It's just that simple. Whenever we've seen it, especially after 2003, there was 70 jobs at the Bear Creek Center Camp, the correctional center, gone. The forestry regional office lost 40 to 50% of the jobs, gone. Our local MHR office was gone. More recently, the troop presence, which we had in both some of these small towns, is gone. Even though there was legislation saying that there will be regional centers when TRU received its legislation. And in fact, I had a very robust conversation, I guess that's a nice way to put it, with one of the vice presidents at the time. And his response, and when I cited that particular regulation, he said to me, well, you're right, Jack, but it doesn't say what that presence looks like in these regional centers. It could be, and I quote this, a laptop on a desk. So that's what regionalization means to us and centralization. So how we found out about this, which was quite, again, surprising. Our staff were given a phone call and said, we've got a PowerPoint presentation for the next day. Can you participate in the Zoom meeting? At which point they went through, I think, a similar exercise that you went through, but why were they regionalizing? The changes that are going to be coming about, the dates. You're going to be this will be on BC bid in October of 2024. Your contract will be terminated by the end of the fiscal year, at the end of March. So I wasn't present at the time of the PowerPoint, but I immediately received a phone call. And my next calls were to Mayor Blackwell, MLA Millerbar, MLA Stone, and in turn, I think Mayor Blackwell made some phone calls to some of the other mayors. And again, I want to go back to this. This is not about self-serving. This is about our knowing that the costs are going to go up for the local councils. It's a given. You're just not going to go through this exercise without having costs go up. And we said that at the time, not to mention the fact you lose all that knowledge, all that experience from taking those contracts away from other contractors. And in our case, been doing it for 30 years, gone. So we set out on a process to try to, I guess, raise and elevate the issue, and sort of try to highlight what we think are going to be the changes that we think will happen without them being stated and articulated by BC Transit. At the time in your PowerPoint, and I believe you received the same thing as Clearwater, which I was present for on Tuesday, there was no mention of a cost increase on the PowerPoints. However, on Tuesday, Councillor Sim in Clearwater asked the very pointed question, is this going to result in an increased cost to our local contract? And the answer was yes, by 20 to 30%. So, and we knew that would come. Now, that was just the stated increase at that time. It could go further depending on the RFP, but they are already anticipating increases. And we know most of our councils in our area, they struggle financially. They don't want to burden taxpayers any further. So we have been pretty sensitive about that. The process of and again, at the council meeting on Tuesday, and I'm ad-libbing a little bit, so bear with me. I thought it was ironic, interesting that there was an apology made by BC Transit representative. We're sorry about the poor communication, but now we're going to have a consultation. So the consultation will consist of, we've got the plan, we have the strategy, we have the dates in which this is all going to happen. We're not going to tell you the real reasons behind why the changes are going to be made. Now let's consult. I mean, who does that? Who does that? You know, there's no consultation. And again, it's just, it just helps you, it causes you to just lose confidence in that body, that they're prepared to function like that. At the meeting, and Mayor Blackwell can confirm this if he wants, but we were told we were the last area, the TNRD and the Kootenays, for this to be rolled out. Everything else has happened. So I drove on my way from Clearwater to Ashcroft to present to the council. I phoned the CAO in 100 Mile House. I asked, have you heard anything about this? Crickets, nothing. I went there yesterday because they were having an open house. So I met with the mayor and the councilors and the CAO, and actually Donna Barnett happened to be there. Probably as many of you may know Donna, who was around when the system got developed. And again, they knew nothing about it. Based on my call, they began to make some inquiries, and they began to hear rumors that yes, their contracts are going to be blended with Williams Lake and Quesnel. So I just find it, I just don't understand it. I mean, you're a funder to a system, and there's going to be massive changes to it and increase to cost to you and your taxpayers, and you're not even at the table to discuss this. I just don't know where else this happens in government. If I can, I'm going to digress a little bit. I'll give you an example of, you're probably familiar with some of the Work BC offices around the province. We went through the exercise in 2010 with Work BC, where they said, we want to shrink from 400 contractors down to 80 around the province. And they were amalgamating all these community futures and self-employment and specialized programs. But what they did was they put out a discussion paper, and the ADM came and met with all the interior people in Kelowna. And frankly, it was a discussion paper because there were a lot of changes made to that. In fact, Clearwater, North Thompson wasn't even a catchment, even though Ashcroft was and Valemont was, and we were 3 times the size. So we became a catchment. But here's the point I'm trying to make. During the presentation by the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, they said to us, we're going to shrink from 400 to 80, but we do not want to lose those legacy providers. We do not want to lose their experience and their skills and their knowledge. So if you bid on this contract, you need to demonstrate how you're going to collaborate in a meaningful way with those current providers. So that experience can be retained within the existing shrinking of the contracts. In my opinion, that if you're going to reorganize, that's how you do it. You don't just throw out 30 years experience, bring in somebody with none from a rural area. So I know I'm probably getting a little short on time, but the previous speaker spoke longer too, so I'm going to I just want to quickly go through some of the changes. And I said this at the Ashcroft Council the other night. There should only be 3 reasons, in our opinion, why you'd want to change something as dramatically as this. You want to improve efficiency, you want to reduce your costs, or you want to improve your ridership. That's it. It shouldn't be because of administrative, ease or administrative, modifications. It should only be for those 3 reasons. We have gone through the changes with BC Transit over the years, and I know I don't look very old, but actually I've been around this for quite some time. So in the early days, there was actually a rural specialist that we consulted with. Then they went to a regional manager system for the contractors and the municipalities. Then they went to 2 regional managers, which of course, those are costs that go up. Then they went to a billing system, which caused more costs to get added on. They eliminated our health connections, and we had full buses going down from Clearwater and Vavenby and Blue River, and they were sending empty buses down from Valemont and McBride. Instead of just bringing them down to Blue River, we could have met them and brought them in. Our drivers constantly passed the buses coming by empty, and ours were being full. We had to pick up those costs, call it the Valley Connector, and they're heavily subscribed. We have lots of people that are using that service. So everything we've seen them do has either resulted in increased cost to the local taxpayer or a denigration of the system, and that's been our experience. I'm just about ready to wrap up here. So just a couple of comments. So the first PowerPoint we received identified that the Board of Governors approved this in February of this year. So here's the Board of Governors. 4 people from Victoria, 1 from Vancouver, 1 from Central Saanich, and 1 from Mission, and 1 from Smithers. So of this total, 4 from Victoria, Transit runs the Victoria system. It's not an operator. BC Transit runs themselves. Smithers Transit runs it themselves. Central Saanich is part of the transit system. Mission, I'm not so sure about, and Smithers is transit. So you've got no regional representation on this Board of Governors that apparently is making decisions for the rest of us. I remember, and having a conversation with Mayor Miller at the time, he was on the board of BC Transit. There may have been some people here that have been appointed to that transit board. I actually remember back to when Councillor Cowell from Kamloops was on the board in the early 90s. So that we've had representation from certainly Kamloops, and certainly from people from the interior. So but that seems to all have been lost. It's now Victoria, Vancouver, and they drive the system. It seems to us, at least anyway. So I'd like to identify what we think should be recommendations, and we're hoping that this board, the TNRD, can support these recommendations. And I'll also end by saying we're prepared to. We didn't have time to put together a PowerPoint, but we're prepared to provide a synopsis and this presentation in writing in a PowerPoint form in the very near future. But our recommendations would be as follows. Before I start, I guess just a little quote. A fellow by the name of G.K. Chesterton, who was a British author and philosopher. And I've been whining now for the last probably 20 minutes, so I'm going to stop that. But Chesterton said one time, he said, crisis is actually opportunity misperceived. And I think that's what we need to take this as. This is an opportunity to change things. So our recommendations would be that the actual immediate suspension of this reorganization plan. Secondly, the Board of Governors needs to include broader geographical and demographic representation. Thirdly, there'll be requested a meeting with the new minister and the deputy, the BC Transit CEO, and their chair of their Board of Governors. After the election, there'll be an independent review of BC leadership, in particular its role with respect to the rural sites and the rural systems. And lastly, we believe that there should be a new funding formula to reflect the lack of density and the large geographical areas that these rural systems provide. So when you look at even their own data around, the difference between the costs of a door-to-door or a handy-dart versus a custom system, it goes something like, a 50, almost 50-50 to a 60-40 to a 70-30. And in our opinion, in these rural communities, that should be the split. It should be a 70-30 split, as opposed to having to require the local taxpayer to take the burden of that. This is not a density issue. We do not have, TransLink or a SkyTrain going along corridors with, 16 brand new 25-story apartment buildings. That's just not the case. But we have to move people around large geographical areas. So I want to maybe just conclude by saying I'm ready to answer any questions too, but just want to say we're prepared to put this in writing and present it to you within the next little while for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Director, first of all, I'm going to take some names. I've got Director Getz and Director Sow. Anyone else right off the bat? Thank you very much, Mr. Keogh. And I'm going to say the same thing to you here that I said to you in Ashcroft on Tuesday, which is if you could please put your requests for your letter of support, your recommendations into a letter and leave them with staff or send them to staff. We don't consider them at this meeting, but we will consider them on an upcoming agenda, probably our next meeting. So that would be awesome. And just a note that today, this afternoon, the community bus for Ashcroft, Cache Creek, Clinton is busy transporting people from Clinton, Cache Creek down to Ashcroft for an advanced care planning session this afternoon. Get your ducks in a row, and then it will be taking people back from Ashcroft to Cache Creek and Clinton. So that is one way that we are utilizing the community bus to move people around a very large area for a special event that otherwise some people in Clinton and Cache Creek might not be able to get to. And it is very much targeted at people who are of a certain age and perhaps do not have access to a car. So that is our our transit system in action. Director Getz, you go first.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. When this first came out, City of Merritt was quite concerned, and we penned a letter right away to ask them what the issue was going to look like, and we met with Elise and her crew. We went down to UBCM and had an hour meeting with them and some of the executive on what was going on, and last week they presented to us, and they have agreed that the rollout was not conceived well, not delivered well. So they have sent us a letter. I'm not sure everybody else should be getting it quite quickly, that they are going to take all of 2025 to roll this out and not even start to implement it until 2026 after they've had consultation with all communities. So they've committed to that. We've also had a conversation about the 70-30, 60-40. And under the way it is right now, we would have to raise our ticket prices by 93%, which we obviously cannot do and will not do. So we've asked them to sharpen their pencils and think about things. And we also have done the same thing, requesting a meeting with the new ministry, whatever it looks like, after Saturday. But they have agreed to take this as a 2-year rollout. We should be seeing something on that fairly quickly. So they've committed to it. And they've kind of put their heels in stopping this whole thing at this point because everybody's unhappy about it. So that's what we're seeing now. Until everybody else gets that piece of paper in their fingers, I mean, talk is cheap, right? So, but we'll see what happens. They've committed to it. We've had several meetings on it, and the board has committed to it. So we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I respond to that?
Certainly.
Okay. I think we're on the same page, obviously, but I guess our hope in coming to this group was that there could be a collective voice of the various municipalities and regional districts. That would, I think, will get more attention. And again, I think most people in this room have been around politics a long time. When you roll something like this out in an election year and it's done as poorly as it is, usually an ADM has lost their job at some point, So my suspicion is that they realize the misstep and they just kick the can down the road to get them out of this election and into 2026. So but that's my interpretation anyway.
There's a great word, fine words, butter no parsnips. So until I see those parsnips buttered, I'm not necessarily going to be taking that without a big grain of salt. Next, I have Director Sow and then Director Blackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Keogh, for coming in today. And let me start off by thanking your Yellowhead Community Services. I literally would not be sitting here or living in Clearwater had it not for your YCS's services in speech therapy, which was the breaking point for my wife and I to decide where to move from when we moved back to Canada from Hong Kong. So with that being said, you went over how, there's no vested interest. $250,000 is a drop in the bucket in YCS services. You made your presentation based on principles that, should be followed for our residents that we represent them in. So I just wanted to share a few points. One, inoculating us with the repeated statement by BC Transit representatives, both at the delegation to TNRD last year, at UBCM Electoral Areas Forum, which I attended and listened to, that everybody else has done this. You guys are the last one. When you have a meeting with them, you can quote me. Yusuf Tsao asks you, if everybody jumps off a bridge, is Area A residents going to jump off as well? That's one. Accountability to taxpayers. That's what we're here for. When when you tell us that, yes, last year to the delegation, the BC Transit reps, I asked if there's, so what are the benefits? Are there cost savings? And they said, nope. They didn't give us the 20 to 30% until this past week at the DOC council meeting. So when we cannot be accountable with our taxpayers, what do they expect us to do? Go back to our taxpayers and say, yeah, we're just gonna jump 30% in costs with no added services at all? Like we can't do that. Lack of consultation from electoral area standpoint, this really ticks me off. I only found out about this through, thankfully Mayor Blackwell has shared a presentation with me, earlier. And when I opened it up and it has said, we have completed local consultation, when not a word was taught, none of the electoral areas nothing, and even then when I approached them at UBCM, they told us that electoral areas have a contract. They do not have a contract with BC Transit. It's, well, be that as it may, when I took the bus the other day just to know what I'm talking about. I get on the bus and the side of the bus says BC Transit. Area A is paying for that. I don't care. You can twist all your, words around and that also takes me up about the TRU thing. I hate it when people twist around words. So I really do wish that when you list out a number of meetings that you would like to line up to have with the ministries, I would like electoral area representation at those. Probably work through TNRD staff on that. And just share an example of the other impacts on service, not just the cost, but the actual service. So when I was on the bus on Tuesday, there was a gentleman who called in and made an appointment for pickup in Lewis Creek. And we drove by, he wasn't there, so we kept driving. And then when we got to Fish Trap, the driver got a call from the dispatch saying that, oh, he's there now, sorry, can you go back and pick them up? I would imagine a larger company, a corporation with no policy says, no, you're late, that's it. We all know, I have to admit, I have not taken a bus in a while, but that doesn't mean I can't empathize with the experiences. Listening to the other riders, they're all going in for crucial appointments. So that's going to be a service that'll be impacted by this centralization. So yeah, thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Are you going to tell the Lee's story?
No, actually, I'll skip the lease story, but I was going to be talking about the accountability. So 2017, we all remember 2017. I won't tell the story about the Ashcroft, but we ended up having our driver get spooked, called back, saw the fires going up the hill around 11:30 in the morning, back, dropped people off in Ashcroft, was heading back up because a rider from Clinton got stopped, went into the hospital, worked until 2 a.m. to get people transported to Merritt. Okay, that was 2017. The point I was going to make though was when a week later, was it a week, 5 days later, when the rat-a-tat-tat dry lightning came through and just peppered the rest of us, 100 Mile, Williams Lake, the North Thompson, everything lit up, Highway 99 was closed. Highway 97 was closed. Highway 1 was closed. We had 3 buses in Clearwater. Transit phoned me and said, move the buses down to Kamloops. We said, no, we can't. We've got to evacuate hospitals. We've got a list of 20 to 30 vulnerable people that we know where they are, that we'll go pick up and evacuate if necessary. And we were on alert at that point. They insisted we move them. So I couldn't convince them otherwise. Logic didn't prevail. They said, well, we'll send buses up from Kamloops. I said, what if 5 closes? You can see the fires at Littlefort. They're on both sides of the river. That didn't matter. Bring the buses. So I don't do this very often, but I phoned MLA Lake and I asked him to phone the Minister of Transport, which he did. 2 hours later, I got a phone call from BC Transit. That's okay, keep the buses there. But that's not the end of the story. A week later, Transit phoned me back, move the buses back to Kamloops. So that's accountability. The minister told them not to move the buses. And as soon as some time went by, they were putting pressure on us to move the buses. Now, we dragged our feet. We did a few other things. I don't know if we camouflaged another bus and made it look like a bus and sent it down. I can't remember exactly what we did, but we were keeping those buses for the ready of those residents. And we could protect them. There was no issue about those buses getting destroyed. Two of the buses were ready to be crushed in any event. And so all the anxiety, the time of getting buses to come in, getting people to pick them up, it was ridiculous. And that's what happens when you get centralized systems.
Director Blackwell.
Yeah, just briefly, what I took from the presentation from BC Transit yesterday, and it was, as pointed out, it was what was not in the presentation, but was asked as questions. And what it boils down to for the North Thompson Valley is a less personalized service done from afar or managed from afar with no benefit to the communities at all. And in fact, a 3 to 6%, 3% is obviously a cost increase right off the top, or 3% tax increase for the whole community, not 3% in the cost of operation. But that's based if I was to say that today. We're talking about a new contract, which we don't know what limit it's going to hit. That's now essentially 2 years out. So that could be 5, that could be 7% for less. We are not getting any benefit from this. We would be much better off with the status quo and inflationary increases. I think that there is absolutely a case to continue to push this. And that, at the very least, there be a split in the contract between the rural systems and the urban systems. Or subcontract requirements for the rural at the very least. And I'm confident that that exists. I also find it funny that when I asked yesterday, were there any communities that ran their own transit system? The transit system that was mentioned was Smithers, and BC Transit actually runs that, not Smithers. So there is a lot of game of clever wordmanship playing here.
I'll just quickly comment to Director Sow and Blackwell's, just to segue into it. So just to give people an example, the Valley Connector is 2 days a week, and that was an initiative through the District of Clearwater and YCS, which brings people into Kamloops. They've touched on it already. But the average in the last 9 years for that bus run is 1,815 riders, which if you divide that by 45 trips, because sometimes trips are canceled, is a full bus both ways for $7.50 one way. There's nobody that can pay to bring people into Kamloops, either the, poverty-stricken people or seniors. And so this service has been phenomenal for our community and area.
Thank you. Taxi fare from Ashcroft. Well, if we had a taxi, people doing it informally, Ashcroft to Kamloops, 1 hour drive, 95 kilometers, $120 to $140 on the private market. And you can take the bus for $5 from Ashcroft to Kamloops every week to do your medical appointments, whatever it is you need to do. Vice Chair Smith.
Thank you, Chair Roden, and thank you very much for your presentation. I find myself somewhat envious of the communities out there that actually have that service, because I'm the mayor for Logan Lake and we don't. It's actually something that we've been talking about a lot with centralization and with the movement towards some of our health centers not operating at the same capacity as they once were, and the impacts that has on all of the small communities. That's a conversation we've been having, is how we expand the service. And right now, there's kind of a service from BC Transit Health Link, but it doesn't really meet the needs of the community in any way. So if there's an opportunity, I know that there's some funding within some of our own groups within the community, and they'd love to be included in the program that you do have. So if there is an opportunity in the future to have that discussion, we'd definitely like to have that with you. Thank you.
So that talks to the nimbleness of YCS being the operator. Lytton, when they needed, in the first year after the fire, YCS was able to offer bus run through Lytton as well.
And let me explain how that came about. BC Transit phoned us and said, do you have any extra hours to put into Lytton? No, we have a contract, it's the health connections that come down from Lillooet, goes through Lytton, goes back up. Can we get some help? Well, I don't think so. So what did we do? We got a bus from the Salvation Army out of Abbotsford. We got funding from the Anglican Church in Lytton. We put funding in ourselves, and Salvation Army kicked in some funding, and we've been running that bus 2 days a week into Lillooet and Ashcroft on an as-need basis for people to access healthcare and groceries. Everything is gone, as Mayor Connor knows, and we have done that repeatedly. We met with the mayor of Sun Peaks and the CEO of Sun Peaks, Darcy Alexander, talked about a computer link from Barrier to there. A lot of people live in Barrier that work at Sun Peaks, lifties and housekeeping. And it would be beneficial to Barrier to have a commuter link if it was, reasonably priced. We talked to the Council of Lillooet, and we're getting a link to Pemberton, between Pemberton and Lillooet. And that's after Greyhound pulled out, just collapsed, because after eBus started up, if we got people over to Pemberton, they could actually access eBus, they could loop to the coast and back up. So they had transportation access. We do this time and time again. We're innovative, we're creative, and we look at funding over and above BC Transit. And in fact, you probably sense my frustration, when we want to get something done, we just do it ourselves. We just find the money and we go do it. We get a bus, we do this. And we're allowed to do that without a motor carrier license because it's within our purposes of our society, because we used to have a motor carrier license. So, you're not going to get that from a centralized for-profit bus system, a bus provider. It's just not going to happen. I don't see it.
All right, well, thank you very much for the presentation, and there will be an opportunity later on under the correspondence section for the board to decide if we want to invite BC Transit to come and speak with us again. All right, we move on to item 6.3. We have an opportunity for the owners of 3888 Lewis Road in Lewis Creek to make representations to the board respecting a building infraction. Is anyone here to speak to that? No. And 6.4, we have an opportunity for the owners of 4000 North Bonaparte Road at Green Lake to make representation regarding a building infraction. Anyone here to speak to that? Unfinished business, building infraction, work without a permit, 3888 Lewis Road. We do have a recommendation. Director Thorpe, seconded by Director Ranta. Any discussion on this? Director Kerslake?
Thank you, Chair Roden. I'm going to support this motion today. However, I'd like to highlight that Simon Appel tragically passed over almost 2.5 years ago. My hope is that when staff carry through with this, or if it passes today, is that they exercise some sensitivity in this regard. Thank you.
I have every confidence that staff will exercise sensitivity in the matter of one of the owners having passed. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor?
Yay.
Is anyone opposed? That is carried. Item 7.2, we have a recommendation on this. Director Ranta, seconded by Vice Chair Smith. This is the building infraction in Green Lake. Anyone have any questions or comments on this? All right, all in favor?
Yay.
Is anyone opposed? That's carried. 8.1 zoning amendment bylaw number 28584705 Stony Place in Pritchard. We have several recommendations. Director Sal moves that, seconded by Director Thorpe. Any discussion on recommendation 1, reading the zoning amendment bylaw for the first and second times? On the question, all those in favor?
Yay.
Is anyone opposed? That is carried. We have a second. Move to Director O'Reilly, seconded by Director Smith. Discussion? All those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. And recommendation 3. Director Newstater, seconded by Director Houghton. Discussion? All those in favor?
Yay.
Opposed, if any? That's carried. 8.2, application number BA 245, South Thompson Valley and Pinnetan OCP Amendment Bylaw. We have three recommendations. Director Thorpe, second, sorry, who's seconded by Director Blackwell? All right, anyone have any questions or comments on this first and second reading? All those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? Carried. Second recommendation. Vice Chair Smith, seconded by Director Sarai. Discussion? All those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. And the third one. Director Thorpe, seconded by Vice Chair Smith. This is taken to a public hearing in conjunction with a regular Board of Directors meeting. Discussion? All those in favor?
Yay.
Opposed, if any? Carried. 9.1, temporary use permit application number TUP 74. We have a recommendation. Director Houghton, seconded by Director Hall. Any discussion on this question? Questions or comments? No. On the question, all those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. 10.1, we have CAO verbal report. Over to CAO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Roden, and good afternoon, Board of Directors. Just a few topics to share today. Firstly, I'd like to just start with the 2025 budget update and next steps. We're well underway in delivering our draft budget that'll be ready in the next few weeks. And we're working on a variety of information that'll we'll be sharing with the public in the near future as well. Again, we'll be using our award-winning tools and taking this information to the next level with even more detailed explanations and best practices for the general public. We continuously will be updating our budget 2025 webpage, and that can be found at tnrd.ca/budget 2025. And we're looking forward to a very productive meeting coming up here at the beginning of November. We will be in October here starting to meet with directors. We meet with all the electoral directors and walk through kind of where we're at from a tax standpoint. We also offer that to all the municipalities. So all directors are involved if they would like to be a part of that. We also meet with some of the CAOs as well. In November, we have our workshop that we've got planned here for a half day, 2 half days leading into our next board meeting. The board will be able to provide their feedback and questions, and our provisional budget will be adopted in December. And then, of course, go through the process in March where we do the final, we get final assessment data, and we will be, we'll be voting on the final budget at that point. So things are going well from a budget standpoint, and we're working hard to try to get to a reasonable number to get us started. Second topic I want to talk about was Birch Island petition update. This petition assent process to expand the Vavenby Fire Protection Service area to the community of Birch Island was not successful, as the number of valid petitions and the net taxable value represented received by the deadline did not meet that 50% threshold that's required by legislation. So a full analysis and report will come on November 7th, so the board can see all the details. This has been put out in the media and shared with the public, of course, in Birch Island. Thirdly, we have our fall 2024 regional newsletter update coming out. This newsletter is nearly finished, and will be printed and mailed in the middle of next week. This is a newsletter created by our communications team, and it's sent to all rural TNRD addresses twice a year. It goes to about 16,000 homes and businesses. We create a similar but slightly different version for each of the 10 electoral areas. This edition has information about our 2025 budget, solid waste and recycling, fire smart, parks and trails planning, and other localized subjects for our 10 EAs. We also keep copies archived on our TNRD website, so if people want to go back and look at them, and they can feel free to do that, and our new one will be loaded up in the near future. Switching gears to public engagement, we have a few things that we've been doing recently around the region. Firstly, official community plan consultation has been going very well. Tonight actually will be the 9th public engagement meeting hosted by the planning department for official community plan projects. Based on direction from the board at previous meeting on March 21st, our staff have initiated the new OCP for electoral areas L and P, as well as electoral areas M and N. We've had excellent turnouts and residents have been generally very pleased with their information they're receiving. We've now had over 400 responses to surveys that we put out asking for their vision on their communities. And the overall impact and the feedback that I'm getting has been extremely positive from directors and from residents. We'll also be holding a Tobiano community meeting on October 30th, which will include land use planning and a discussion of a new fire protection service. We will be advertising this, and in fact, I think it went out yesterday. South Green Lake, Director Smith, we also know we put a survey out for the South Green Lake residents, and it's open until November 15th, and that's about a street light service that is proposed. We've gotten more than 200 responses to date. The survey is not a formal vote, but it's more of a straw poll to determine if there's an actual appetite for a public assent process. So far, the response has been strongly, we're getting a response strongly against proceeding with this formal consent. As mentioned, this survey is open for another month, so we'll confirm results once those are finished. Next is the Parks and Trails survey. We've got a lot of surveys going on right now, and we're really happy with the response we're getting. This survey is an opportunity we just recently finished for input into TNRD Parks and Trails as part of the engagement process for our Parks and Trails strategy. This survey was open to residents across the TNRD, and we received more than 300 responses during September and early October. Residents shared their feedback on experience using our parks and trails and what they would like to see in the future. Between this survey and stakeholder engagements over the past several months, we will be creating a draft of a parks and trail strategy and bringing that forward to the board for review, and this will happen in 2025. And then finally, from a I guess an engagement standpoint, the Shetland Creek Fire post-wildfire hazard meeting is coming up. We'll be facilitating a Shetland Creek Fire hazard meeting on October 30th for residents from Venables Valley, as well as Hat Creek and Oregon Jack Road areas. The meeting will take place in the evening at Cooks Ferry Band Office, and we'll also have a Zoom meeting earlier that day for those that can't attend in person. And it will be the same information. We're just providing more ways to see the information. These meetings are actually being led by the province because the Ministry of Forests leads these post-wildfire risk assessments, but our staff will be attending to support residents and to ask questions. Our recovery manager has continued to work one-on-one with many residents to help them through since these fires, and is making way right now and doing a good job of trying to find solutions for our residents in the Venables Valley and the surrounding area that had homes destroyed. So we're working through that. And then just lastly, a late item that I wanted to add. Kim, our Fire Smart coordinator, caught me in the hallway, and I said that I would share this. On Tuesday, October 15th, in the Paul Lake community, the TNRD Fire Smart program held our first ever chipper day. She heard back from the chipping company, and we removed 3 tons or approximately 6,000 pounds of chip material from the community. The material was taken to Cinnamon Ridge to be made into mulch. But this is just one example how fire smarting is going to continue to make us more and more safe across the region, and more coming in the near future. So with that, if there's any questions, I will take them now and then pass it over to Mr. Kelly for just a few updates from him.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Director Newstater?
Just a random curious question. What happens with the chips? That's a lot of chips. What do they do with that material?
It was taken to Cinnamon Ridge to be made into mulch. So I'm not sure what folks do with it from there, but I'm sure gardening and land coverage.
Anyone else have any questions for CAO Hildebrand about his report? All right, over to Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few things, and I know that most of you would have received an update on my or an email this morning on my first update regarding UBCM 2024. So a total of 19 meetings were had throughout the conference on behalf of the TNRD, so many with ministry staff, ministers themselves, and other organizations like UBCM and Enbridge. Overall, it was an extremely successful convention, I think. And we've now begun the work to determine what next steps should look like. And like I said, that presentation was shared with the entire board, although it was given more in depth with the EA Directors Committee this morning about sort of specific next steps that staff are looking to take to ensure that we're continuing to advocate for the priorities of the region. The next topic, just as sort of a high-level update for the board, staff have been in discussion with Highbar First Nation. We're entering into the final draft stages now of a memorandum of understanding with that Indigenous community. So we are anticipating that will be coming to the board for formal authorization by the end of November. We've also been in conversation, and these are ongoing, with the Whispering Pines Clinton Band, and as well as the Skeecheson Band. Finally, from me, just a quick update for the board. TNRD staff at the end of September underwent Indigenous awareness training. So it was delivered two separate sessions were delivered over 2 days to ensure optimal uptake by TNRD staff. This represents the beginning of the educational journey for TNRD staff when it comes to growing our organizational awareness on Indigenous relations and Indigenous cultural humility and safety. In partnership with the people and engagement team, we will continue to work to grow opportunities of understanding for Indigenous communities, their history, and colonial impacts. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take some.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. Any questions from anyone regarding that? CEO Hildebrand, you have a question for Mr. Kelly.
I don't have a question, just a comment, just as a reminder. I know we have an important date coming up on Monday, the 21st, with our friends at TTES and the MOU signing, the flag raising, and the C2C. I had the opportunity to meet with Chief and Council just a week or two ago, and just to confirm the agenda, and they were very excited about this upcoming event. So the entire board, of course, is welcome, but I know it's a short presentation here next Monday at 10, I believe it starts. So FYI, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kelly and CEO Hildebrand. Item 10.1.2, Board and Committee Meeting Calendar for 2025. We do have a recommendation.
Second.
Director Smith, seconded by Vice Chair Smith. Any questions or comments? Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking at the utility schedule and it looks like there's only 3 meetings being held in 25 and the first one's not till June 25th. Given that we have a large number of utilities and just everything that's happening with utilities, I was wondering if there was a potential for putting one a little earlier in the year as well, because 3 seems like not enough, not when we start in June.
Mr. Vieira?
Just to provide some context, prior to 2 years ago, those utility meetings were twice a year, and the utility committee decided to have 3 meetings per year. The reason we're having the first meeting scheduling it later in the spring is because we don't anticipate there to be as much updates in terms of staffing updates and progress made on projects during the winter months. So that's why we're scheduling it for June. But if the board wishes additional meetings, those could be scheduled.
Thank you. Any other questions on the calendar, committee meeting calendar, board meeting calendar for 2025? Be here before we know it. All right, on the question that, CEO Hildebrand.
Sorry, Chair Roden. You'll also notice that our annual out-of-town board meeting has been moved up. And so I'm not sure if there's any feedback on that one, but we felt we could fit it in June and not get in the way of tourism and wildfire season. So I'm not sure if there's any feedback on that, but I think that'll work well.
Thank you. On the question then. All those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. 10.1.3, Boundary Committee Terms of Reference and Meeting Date. We have a double header recommendation. They can be moved together, I believe. Awesome. Double the fun. Director Bass? Seconded by Director O'Reilly. All right. Any questions or comments on this? Director O'Reilly, you must be very proud. Any questions or comments? All right, on the question, then all those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. 10.1.4, replacement committee member appointment, the Plan Monitoring Advisory Committee. We have a recommendation. Director Middleton, seconded by Vice Chair Smith. Discussion? All those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? Carried. 10.1.5, Pritchard Community Sewer System Membrane Filtration Equipment Contract Award. Who would like to move this one? Director Houghton? Oh, what's that? All right. Director Morris, you can move that apparently. All right, and Director Newstater, you're apparently you're seconding it. You sure are. I'm just going to delegate here. Any questions or comments? Good to see this going ahead. On the question, then all those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? Carried, and we're going to stay in Pritchard, sorry, for 10.1.6. Who, Director Houghton's going to make that recommendation. Director Morris is going to second it. Thank you. Any discussion on the Pritchard Water Filtration Project construction? We're all happy about it, apparently. All those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That's carried. Growing Communities Fund and Canada Community Building Fund, Electoral Area I, Wallachine Reservoir. Who's moving that? Director Thorpe, who would like to second that? Director Hall, thank you. Any discussion on this? All right, on the question, all those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. 10.1.8, Rural Economic Diversification, Blue River Trails Detailed Design Project. Director Onslow, would you like to move that? There you go. Gentle suggestions here. Director Sow, how about you second that? That's awesome. Do we have any discussion on this point? All right, on the question then. All those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That's carried. Fire Smart Program Update. This is for information. This is the written version of the presentation that we had at the Committee of the Whole meeting. So this is just for your records. If you have any questions or comments, you may say them here, or you may save them up and ask them directly. But at least now we have a written copy with some of the statistics and numbers for the second year of our Fire Smart program. Also for information, we have the building permit activity highlights. Anyone have any comments on that? We have two items here listed under action requested. Actually, the Ministry of Children and Family Development regarding the letter of support for a proclamation should be under information only. The TNRD does not do proclamations. So we do have 11.1.1 Clean Farms letter of support. They are requesting a letter of support from the TNRD. Director Houghton, seconded by Director Thorpe. Any discussion on this? Question, Director Middleton?
Is there any local component to this request? Like just when I was sort of reading through, it seems that this is something that's coming out of back east. And is this just like a blanket request for a letter of support from an organization that we've never even heard of?
Hey, Mr. Vieira?
Yes, and the timing of this letter is a little clunky because actually in the next board meeting, you'll be seeing a recommendation coming from the Solid Waste Committee, which is recommending proceeding with a partnership with this organization, with Clean Farms, to do a pilot project. But for that to happen, Clean Farms needs to apply for this funding grant, which is part of the report that was received by the Solid Waste Committee that formed their recommendation.
Thank you.
Any further questions about this? On the question then, all those in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. We have some items for information only, one of which, of course, is a letter to the Board of Directors from Elise Wren, Manager of Government Relations for BC Transit. Did anyone have a motion that they would like to see come out of that? I know it says at the bottom of her letter, she's been speaking with Mr. Kelly. She says, I will be coordinating my next visit to the TNRD to align with an upcoming board meeting. I would suggest that we might want to write to her, make a resolution to send her a letter inviting her to come to our next committee of the whole meeting. Mr. Kelly?
If I can, I think conversations with CEO Hildebrand is the committee of the whole meeting in December, I believe it is already quite full. So there was some discussion as to whether or not Ms. Wren would be available to come to the November 21st board meeting. And then I know that the letter that the board sent to her a few months back also indicated the board's wish for her to do a tour of the region. And so coordinating that at the same time. And I've been in contact with Ms. Wren and she's open on both of those dates.
So then we do not need a resolution. You are working on that already to get her on the agenda for the 2nd November meeting. Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments on any of the items under information? No. We move on to new business. Does anyone have any new business? Director Houghton.
Just two things. Right before this meeting started, I got a phone call from former Director Stamer, wishing everybody the best here. He said he wished he could be here. And I don't know why he phoned me 10 minutes before the meeting. I said, what are you doing, Ward? You renewing your prescription of them meds I got you a year ago? But anyhow, he just wanted to pass on his, he wished he was here. And second thing was on the weekend, I sprayed 41 gallons of stain on all my outdoor fences to try and protect them. And then I decided to clean my sheds out of all my old paint. Long story short, I had my Toyota pickup about 3/4 loaded with, I guess you call it hazardous waste. And I made a trip over to the Mount Paul Industrial Park to our hazardous waste drop-off center that we, TNRD and the city do together. And I just wanted to pass on, the gentleman there would give great service, and to see the amount of product that was there that has come from both TNRD and city and going to be recycled was really amazing. Because when I first started staining my fences years ago, I asked Cloverdale Paint, what do I do with all these paint cans? He said, jump on them, throw them in a duffel or a garbage bag and throw them in the dumpster. I said, boy, that's really good for the environment. So I just wanted to say what a great service is that this provides to our local area, and hats off to those that made it happen. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that. Anyone else have any new business? Does anyone have any notices of motion? No? Any question period questions? Everyone's left the gallery. Director Getz, you have a question for the TNRD board. Go ahead.
Actually, not a question. I guess I probably missed this, probably should have been new business. I just wanted to point out that on October the 10th, Merit worked with the 6 bands, the Stuart's Resource Committee, to return some of the flooded land back to them as a reclamation project. It's never been done before. It's a very exciting time for us, and it's a very exciting time for the First Nations, because a lot of this land was underwater for 200 years. So now it's open and it will be returned to them, and it'll be turned to whatever state they feel that it needs to be. So we're one of the first groups to do it. We're very excited to team up with them. And if you can, you want to, there's stories about it all over the place if you want to know what's going on with that, but it's an exciting time for us. So it's really interesting just being a facilitator and watching how First Nations group work, and how different their ideas are compared to ours. So it's really nice to sit there and watch that, and to learn about things like the yellow grandmothers and the red grandfathers, and the truth oath and the oath keepers. It's a lot of information coming from them that they're willing to share with us, and I'm very happy to be on the group that is learning about it. And there's a particularly elderly First Nations woman that tells me that we need to have food at every event that we're at. So we're working on that. So, but it's we're pretty excited. It's a neat time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have anything? We have no need of a closed meeting, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Happy Halloween.
Have a great afternoon.